Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce a man who needs no introduction.
Yo, welcome to the Delinquent Show. My goodness, we are seriously excited. We have got an absolutely legend of the basketball game. Just a legend in everything he does. Johnny, wow.
Yeah, we got there in the end.
We finally got there. We won't tell you how bad he is technically, but I'm going to introduce you to the one, the only, Sir Phil Craven. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm doing very well. I'm very, very proud of my total incompetence technically anyway, so I don't give a damn what you say.
Obviously, you're alone, because if Jocelyn was there, she would have fixed it straight away.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
How are you? You're looking great.
Well, that's very kind to say. I've just retired now. I'm fully retired from working for Toyota, so now I'm just getting used to not having to wake up at ridiculously early times for meetings with Japan, and which is good, but it takes a bit of getting used to. So, and with this heat we're having at the moment, I don't know if it's my age or just I'm an ex-basketball player. I'm knackered by it. Yeah.
So now you're going to be under Jocelyn's feet even more.
Probably, yes. Yeah. But we get on.
Well, we'll open up with an easy one. A while ago,
Yeah.
Dave Kiley contacted us and he said, I wonder if you can help us, lads. And we said, yeah, what's up? He said, I'm interviewing Phil. I said, right. He says, give me an icebreaker, something that I can ask him as an icebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, all right, no problem. Ask him what his term means when he says you frotched a shot. When it's a frotch shot. And when we watched the interview, he said it in his American accent, and you hadn't a clue what he was going on about.
Well, I can tell you something now. I don't know what you were going on about with your blinking Scouse accent.
When you used to come training us at Robin Park,
Yeah.
when I was on the world-class performance plan,
Yeah.
and you used to come doing the individual training sessions with me.
Yeah.
You used to sit behind me, and before the shot had even hit the ring, you'd say, no, you frotched it, lad. You frotched it.
Yeah. I never used that word. It must have been another one.
You did, because you said exactly the same to me. Stop frotching it, lad.
Yeah. Well, that buggered me up anyway, because I don't remember it at all, but that could be the age as well, you see. But I remember being at the training session, but I mean, my main thing was get it up the front, lad, you know.
Oh, that was another
That's
one.
how, That's how it usually ended. Well, for the viewers,
Yeah.
especially the younger generation,
Yeah.
could you explain how you got into wheelchair basketball?
Yeah. So I had a rock climbing accident when I was 16, and after a first night in a general hospital, I ended up in Southport, the spinal unit, just north of Liverpool, and so after, I think because the accident happened on the Sunday, so I went to Southport on the Monday, and on the Wednesday there was a training session for basketball outside the window where I was on a tennis court. We played outdoors then, you know, for the young ones. But we played outdoors. You had to allow for the wind sometimes when you're taking a long. I am not kidding. And so that's how I saw it for the first time. And then I spent about 8 weeks in bed, got up in the chair. And really, I didn't play wheelchair basketball for about the first year. I did table tennis, swimming, different stuff. But then I got into wheelchair basketball, and there was nothing like it. And I don't mean because I was in a wheelchair. There was no sport like it. You know, I was all very good at parts of cricket. I wasn't a good batsman, but I could catch anything and throw anything, and bowl a bit. And So wheelchair basketball, and the fact it just loved the training just as much as the playing. And you might find that strange as well. But it was so difficult to play the game when you're a T7, T8 paraplegic, because in those days there were no bucket seats. They were flat.
Yeah.
And so your balance was a real problem. So I couldn't hit above the ring to begin with, not because I didn't have the strength, or I was a pretty much of a, I don't know, a sapling really in comparison to what I became, say, 3 years later. This was in 67 I started playing. And but it was all to do with balance. Once you lifted the ball above your head to shoot, then you lost balance. So you lost, I wouldn't say any idea of where the bucket was. But so it took you time it took time and time. I remember once I couldn't stand this older guy. I was 17, you know, and he was called Tommy Pearson. He'd broken his back when I think in the early 60s, when a passenger walkover bridge at a railway station collapsed after a Bury football game, and he kept, you know, he was quite a good defender, and I couldn't get past him, so he had these bloody big brakes on his chair, and I put one on as I was going past. And he said, "Listen," he said, "if I get you, I'll break every finger on your hand." You know. Anyway, he never caught me for about 10 minutes, and then he cooled down a bit, I think.
So, talking about that with your training, Phil, you developed a shot that was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
How did you develop that shot?
Well, again, balance in the chair. And by that time, now, hang on. When did I go to France? I had an ordinary E&J chair, so no camber, no nothing, when I was in France. So I started playing in 67, and then in 69 I got in the international team, and then I went to work in France at a big rehabilitation centre on the coast in Brittany, and that's where I developed that shot. So I'd be about 22 then, 23, and to have better balance in the chair, I used to put just underneath my shoulder blade on my left-hand side, I'd sort of lodge the push handle that I cut short anyway into there, and it gave me great stability. And then I realised I could lean way back with this. What does Joe Giratni call it? Not a prayer shot, because that means you miss. The swan shot, because I sort of arc back like that, and I just found that I could do it over anybody, and it was great to do it over fours, you know, over 4 pointers. You know, here they come, I'm going to swamp him. And so I just lean even further back and use their hand that they were trying to defend with as a pointer to give me more height to put the ball in the basket. And yeah. So
first time I seen it was in the Big 8. You demonstrated it live in one of the Big 8 games, and you drew the foul.
All right, yeah. Well, there must have been reasonable referees then, because that didn't always happen. But no. But you've got to do that. You've got to try and develop stuff that other people don't have. Like I used to shoot on layups with 2 hands. I didn't do it with 1 hand to begin with, because all the guys at Southport at the club, the first team, or the 2 teams that used to win the championship from 1960 onwards. National championship were either Lodgemore in Sheffield or Lime Green in Macclesfield. They were all ex-army, and there was a player called Ginger Swindlest. He got shot just at the end, a few days before the end of the Second World War, and they all shot with 2 hands. And so I thought, but then I saw Denver Branham in '69, one of the great American players. He would be a 4 or 4.5 now. And he used to go down by his foot plates on the right-hand side and spin this thing off the backboard. I thought, bloody hell, that's smart. So I started practicing my own. I couldn't go down to the foot plates, but I could do a spin shot. And so I started doing a spin shot, but I never perfected it from the left-hand side. And then it was again when I was in France, and maybe just before then, I developed the one-hand shot. Every time it was a one-hand shot, whether it was a layup or a spin shot or middle distance shot. The only shot I did that was still with two hands was a 3-pointer. But then I used to be quite accurate with that, but that can be defended at the top level relatively easily. So I just developed then a shot which was never more than 15 feet. It might have been, I don't know, normally 13, 14 feet up the front shot. But then I had this swan shot in case anybody thought they could get at me, you know.
And I do remember the first time I guarded you, you went down on that left-hand side. I thought, I got him here, no problem. And you just leaned back, and it just went...
Yeah.
I was like,
That's
wow. That was just unbelievable.
They can get you, you know. I remember I.W.B.Delinquents, he always used to think he could get me, you know, when he was about 14 and I was ancient, about 30. And yeah. Ask him about that, yeah.
We will. So, you've seen some great players we don't know much about, and the people don't know about Haggai. What sort of player was he?
Well, you know, the Israeli team were basically, I think, to be quite honest, a set of cheats when it comes to classification. When you see a team come along to a training session, wherever we were in the world, you know, international, and not one of them takes the chair back to the accommodation. They were all polios, by the way.
All right.
But then you start to wonder, well, how can it be? You know, and one of them, which was a 1 in the old system, 12 points on court, 1, 2, 3 points wise. One of them who was a 1 there became a 3 under the new system. So, but Haggai was a 4 because he had a leg that was useless and a leg like a tree stump, a tree branch, and he just had everything. He had this. He could shoot, but he was a master tactician. He was like as if he was playing chess, and probably the greatest game I've ever seen. And I've seen some great ones more recently in the early 2000s, and then still, still today. But was when the Israelis came to the international games at Stoke Mandeville. Now this would be around maybe about 85, something like that. And would it be? No, it wouldn't. It'd be late 70s, maybe. And the Israeli team was nothing like as strong as the American team, who thought they were going to whitewash them. And he slowed the game down. It might have been boring for the fans watching, but I think Israel won 36-35. And everything was done under complete control. The Americans couldn't handle it. And which didn't disappoint me. And but he did have everything. And you know, he was in the like the All-Star 5 that was voted on by on email at the end of the 20th century. And he fully deserved to be in there, along with Dave Carley and 1 or 2 others. And he just had everything, and he was a great table tennis player. He used to win the gold medal in the lowest class, you know, classification wise of table tennis, and he used to play a guy called Mike Dempsey from the States again, who was a brilliant player. He was smashing the ball all over the place, but little ping pong ball, but he'd go back about, well, if I say 3 meters or 4 meters from the table and be defending it, and this guy was smashing it away, and he'd get him in the end. So he was a master at working out the weaknesses of the opposition and how the Israelis could play to their great strengths. And the final comment on our guy was that we were playing Israel, and we had a reasonable team by then. It must have been the early 80s. Our guy was there. They were all there. And we were ahead with about maybe, I think, 8 seconds to go, something like that. And it was our ball. But the guy, whoever it was on the sideline, passed it into Brian Bennett, who was moving backwards, and he went back over the halfway line. Ball to the Israelis, well, there's only a guy going to shoot it. And we had a high defense up against that. You know, we were pressing them so they couldn't get near the basket. And he got near me way beyond the, what do you call it? The
3-point line.
Yeah. Just beyond, I would say, the modern 3-point line. And he launched it, left-handed shooter, and he launched it, not in a proper shot. He gave it a bit of a heave-ho, and it went straight in. And it was there was no 3-point shot then. So that leveled it up. And they won bloody overtime. Brian, I don't think Brian's with us anymore, but it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. But that guy made the most of it again. Brilliant player.
Well, there was a thing probably about 10 years ago that went viral on Facebook.
Yeah.
I can't remember which group put it up. It was who's the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
It was about 10 years ago, and so many names got put into the hat. There was Dave Carley, there was Van der Linden, there was Hank McKenzie. All these names went in.
Yeah.
It was a poll, and Dave Carley ended up at the top.
Right.
And then right at the end, Dave Carley commented on the post and said, in his opinion, it's always going to be Baruch Haggai.
Well, there you go. Yeah. He just had that je ne sais quoi, as the French say. That I don't know what it was, but he was the greatest. And you know, fortunately, I was president of IPC at the time. So in London in 2012, the Israeli, must have been the National Paralympic Committee, that wouldn't agree to get him how do you call it, an accreditation for the games.
Yeah.
So he contacted me, and of course I fixed it, and he was there, and we met up just near the main stadium in the park there in London, and met up and exchanged some. But you know, the other thing about him is he used to smoke at timeouts. Never mind half time. Oh, quick drag. He had a heart attack. No wonder he had a heart attack when he was, I think, 50. But he recovered from that by the time of London. But unbelievable, you know. Just get one on.
Well, there's one for you. So, for the viewers, you was part of the 1993-1994 Euro Cup champions team with Sheffield. The only team to ever have done it from Britain. What was that like?
It was pretty fantastic. In the qualification, you know, we were in Salzburg, and did we have Callum Gordon for that? No, I don't think Callum played, and so we struggled a bit in that qualification. We qualified by something like, you know how they used to divide up points and all this, and I think we qualified by 0.15 of whatever this division was, points for, points against, of the matches between the two teams that were tying for this qualification. And I think it was Salzburg, and Salzburg just lost out, you know, with what's he called from Austria,
Walter
Faller. And so we got to the final. Callum was back in for that. And I was addled by then, you know, I was 44, but it was great. And I just joined Steelers because I've been playing for a few years for Telford, and then I think it was Telford. And but then Colin asked me to go over there, so we did. And it was fantastic. And I think it was Mo in the final, and I think Mo beat Van der Linden's team in the semi, and I can't remember who we beat. So we were up against Mo in the final with who was the player? He seemed to only have one bad leg, a bit of a bad leg. Philip Bay. Philip Bay was against us, shooting from the left-hand side off the glass, and it was me and Dave Bramley defending there, and And so I got 3 fouls before half time. And so at the end, after we won, he said, this is a fix. He said, I had 3 fouls. I was on 3 fouls. I should never have been on him. He was on 3 fouls.
Yeah.
I said, because I can speak French, I said, what do you mean? I said, I was on 3 fouls before you. So I just kept the other 2 fouls longer than you did. I don't know if he got sent off or not. And that when after the final, because he always used to sit, not just on a cushion, but on a hard piece of something that he hid underneath the cushion, you see.
That's right, he did, yeah.
So Corbario was there, classifier, and I went. He was the one who had to take the decision, but we caught him in the changing rooms, and when we came in, he picked this thing up and threw it in the corner under a shower curtain or something. But we got him, and I don't know if we did anything about it, but yeah. So I can't stand cheats, and that was one, who was just wanted to gain advantage when he was such a tall player anyway, with brilliant balance. He didn't need it, but anyway, that's another story. But it was brilliant to win, and I don't think Russ Sims was all that happy that we'd won, because he was there in the crowd and watching, and we were down at Milton Keynes. That's where the final was held, and because I'd left Telford or whatever team it was that I was playing for at the time, and he must have not been too pleased. We've made it up together since, but yeah, so great. And then we had a reception at Sheffield Town Hall, and commemorative plates, silver plates with the names put on them, and of the players, and yeah, it was fantastic.
Did you ever think for 1 minute that would be the only team from Britain that would ever win it?
No, I didn't. But when you think back as to why that's why it is, because you can't earn any cash in Britain, and all the players go abroad, don't they? And and that's continuing to be the case. So probably it'll never happen unless there's a change in the mentality over here.
Yeah, that's true.
So you left. You stopped playing basketball, and then you moved into.
We won the Andrew Vergowan Cup in Zaragoza in Spain. After that, I think so how old would it be then? Because we won in '94, didn't we? But I think we won that in either '95 or '96. Yeah.
Yeah,
but it was great.
2 European under your belt. So you left. You stopped playing basketball, and you moved upstairs. What was your first job upstairs as management?
Well, I'd moved upstairs long before that, because it needed somebody to get things going, both with GB, GBWBA as it was then, and so I was chairman of the GBWBA, Great Britain Wheelchair Basketball Association, on 3 occasions. But it was a bit like being captain of Southport. You couldn't handle it for more than 2 years, because I wouldn't say backbiting, but it was just one of those positions. It was far better being a player than being the captain, and it was far better not being the chairman of the GBWBA. You could only take it so much. So that's where I kicked off. I'd already been a secretary of Southport Club. So then in 82, I met with Stan Labanovic at the European Championships, which were in Falun in Sweden, and had breakfast with him and brought up the fact, because he was then the chairman of God, what a title this is, the basketball section of the International Stoke Mandeville Wheelchair Sports Organisation or something like that. And we met, and I highlighted how the system was wrong, because there was a great American player called Dave Efferson, and somehow cannot see Dave being a cheat, right? So don't think I'm saying he was, but they put his points, his class for track as class 3 instead of class 4 or class 5. You don't need to know any more detail than that. But that meant that he was only a 1 in wheelchair basketball. And Dave Kiley and me had been out with Dave to the pub during the international games. I don't know in what year, 75, 76, something like that. And Dave couldn't get up and down a curb in his chair. So that just showed he'd never practiced it, because he'd only used his chair on court.
Yeah.
And so I'm going on with Stan about this, and this is just another classic example, Stan, of the unfairness of the system. Dave Efferson was a classic 3 in the new system. He definitely wasn't a flipping 1. And so we nearly came to blows. But me and Stan Labanowicz, it was that bad. Anyway, to his great credit that night, he appointed, so in 82, a player classification committee, and the chairman was Horst Strohkendel, the inventor of the new system that had come in 84 at the Paralympics at Stoke Mandeville. But in 84, I replaced Horst as the president of that. And then in 88, at my last games as a player, which was in Seoul, in 88, I took on Stan for the chairmanship of the basketball section, international basketball section of the Stoke Mandeville Games, and I was elected. And so that's when I kicked off as being sort of head of international wheelchair basketball, and that's where it really started to flow. And I started to get some enemies, because not within wheelchair basketball, but outside. And so in 89, 1 year after I'd become chairman, I created the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation. And then in 93, we withdrew from being under the umbrella of ISM WSF, which is the international, ISM, International Stoke Mandeville Wheelchair Sports Federation. And we went on our own. And that's when we really kicked off. And then after that, we really kicked off by not getting on at all with the president of IPC. I mean, they'd only been founded in 89. And they started wanting to have certain Paralympic sports in the Olympics. And without any consultation with the 2 sports that they'd first elected. Well, the first one was wheelchair marathon, which came under IPC athletics. But wheelchair basketball was under the IWBF. And I learnt about this through some sort of somebody telling me about it. But they were only going to have 4 teams. So it was like a demonstration event, really. And then all the other sports said, hey, if they're in, we're in. And at the end of the day, the IOC said no to everything. But really, that was when I think I declared war on Bob Stedwood, and that continued until I became president of IPC in 2001. So for about that would be 92 and 92. So for about 9 years, we were hardly talking to each other, and we were a bit of outcasts. In 93, at the big sports council meeting for the IPC, which met in Atlanta, so 3 years before the games in Atlanta. At the lunch break from this meeting, it was a one-day meeting. First of all, the secretary to the sports council got up and said, "Right, we've got $144,000 to split between the IPC sports." And if you join me in the bar, we'll do that. And of course, we weren't invited because we weren't an IPC sport. And the guy from bloody archery said, "Oh, it's such a pity that wheelchair basketball isn't part of the IPC." I just didn't reply to him. I thought, you bloody idiot, you know. I mean, we're of course I thought we were the number 1 sport, bit of a big head, but which we were. Course, but we were outcasts, and so that continued for a long. It's a long set of stories that maybe I'll put in a book one day. But then things didn't get better, and during the games in '96, there was a right bust up between me and the IPC and the organising committee. So
we'd heard that, and we've got it on our channel, the 2000 Sydney game between GB and USA. When we had 15,000, it was the group game. We had 15,000 people outside in the sellout arena, and there was like 5,000 watching outside on the big screen.
Yeah.
And the game went to overtime. And in an IWBF write-up, it was branded the greatest Paralympic game of all time.
Right. Well, that was.
And we'd heard that was one of the games. At that moment, that was when IPC were in discussions that wheelchair basketball might be going to IOC because of it was the crowds that we were pulling in.
I don't think those discussions took place in 2000. I don't know who's talking. I don't think so. But again, in 2000 in Sydney, which were great games, by the way. Let's not. And that match, I'm trying to. I was there.
You was.
With Tibuto.
Yeah, you was. Yeah.
From Schulte that sank us from nearly the halfway line.
No, that was the bronze medal game. We're talking about the group game. What went to overtime?
Okay. All right. Yeah.
And we don't actually ever talk about that game, the bronze medal game. All right, Phil, we don't talk about that.
We still have nightmares over that shot.
That shot was going in I wasn't right behind it or in front of it, but I said, and when it went in, I slammed the table that hard that my laptop went up about 6 inches in the air. I think Tip thought there'd been an explosion, and yeah, so that wasn't happening in Sydney, but another. Because the only contact I had with IPC, I was in charge of wheelchair basketball, so I used to go to the Sports Council meetings. And and the 97 meeting in Sydney, so 3 years again before the games, I went into this room, and IPC wanted to get basketball for people with an intellectual disability in the games in Sydney. And so it's easier to get a new discipline in a sport into the games rather than a new sport, full stop. Yeah. So they changed our name from wheelchair basketball. I was president, should have been wheelchair basketball. And they put basketball in brackets wheelchair. And then basketball in brackets ID for the head of their. I mean, they had nobody who was head of basketball, but they had one person who was head of all the sports, few sports that they had. So I said at the coffee break, I said, if that's not changed to wheelchair basketball, by the time I come back in, wheelchair basketball's out to the games in Sydney. And it was changed. Can you believe it? That they were messed with us like that? They would. They had no regard for us at all. So it was pistols at dawn every time,
Well, going on the classification, it's a huge thing right now. And recently we did a post on Facebook, and we posted an interview that we found of you talking about classification and then names that you just mentioned and the meeting.
Yeah.
And obviously, wheelchair basketball was in threat of not making Paris because of the classification and the ongoing between IPC. Yeah. So this year, me and Cindy devised a plan called the Third Eye. And every week, we found people that had made it to the Paralympic level that had obviously cheated the system.
Mm.
And one of the reasons we did it was, if there's someone who's a 2, but they're classified as a 2, but realistically they're a 3.5. At Paralympic level, we believe that they just it's going to end up deleting history, because the legitimate paraplegic 2s will not be remembered because of these 2s that are being classified.
Yep.
So it obviously it's caused a bit of a stink with people. People are saying we shouldn't do it, we shouldn't name and shame. But we're not naming and shaming the athlete. What we're doing is highlighting that these people have beat the system of IWBF.
Yeah.
So, one example is what Cindy's spotted is people now with social media and everything they do online. There's currently a 2-pointer that's walking up a mountain, riding a mountain bike up a mountain, and jumping off a box, but made it to the Paralympics as a 2. Well, that's why we can't stomach it.
No, I think you're right not to. I think you're right to stomach it. I don't know. I don't know how you present it. You have to be careful with that. But that's why I kicked off, because it was just the way I said it. When it was a system of 1, 2, 3, 12 points on court, then the French team in '75 came over, and 2 key players changed. One changed from a 3 to a 2, and one changed from a 2 to a 1. And both were in the starting 5 of the French team, even before they changed that classification. And it transformed the team. Now, the French team was a very good team anyway, but this player, Michel Ledoux, I played with him, like I was in the same changing room as him forever, in France, because we played on the... So you know what someone can do. And he might have been a 3.5 in this new system, which would definitely not make him a 2 in the old system, because he had leg movement. He could, adduct, but he couldn't abduct, whatever it is. I can't remember that. And but that's why I kicked off and supported Horst, because Horst in the late 70s and very early 80s couldn't get his system into Stoke Mandeville for wheelchair basketball. Why? Because he was a doctor of sports science, and it was medical doctors that ruled Stoke Mandeville at the time, following on from Gutman, etc. Some of them were quite good people, but they had no idea about sport. They knew about the body and how it was set up, so they could get cheated like mad. I mean, Ledoux said to me in '75, before he was changed at Stoke Mandeville, after he'd arrived from Paris on the train. Now, in those days, there wasn't the TGV, the Train de Grande Vitesse, the incredibly fast train. You had to get a train from Paris and if it was a boat train, the old bloody train went on the boat. But it took hours. And he said, there I am. He says, I've arrived. It's taken 10 hours to get from Paris to Stoke Mandeville. They lie me, I'm absolutely jiggered. I've been stood up all the way because there were no seats, right?
Yeah.
And then they get me lying down on this bed, examine me. They don't tell me to take my heavy boots off, a bit like the brown ones I used to wear. Same, identical, actually. And he said, lift your legs. Well, he said I couldn't because it was jiggered. And I had my boots on. So, you pick up all these different stories and you just know it's wrong. But the new system is 10 to 20 times better than it was under the old medical system. That's for sure. But the problem, I think, maybe with IWBF now, I think when we kicked it off with Horst, there were several of us who were former or then current players who knew about what it was to be a 1, a 2, and a 3 that became 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. And so, but that's always a threat, and you've got to be on it. You've got to be on your marks. But if somebody is doing all that and they're a 2, but you see, I remember going to Korea when was it, 2014, for the World Championships.
Yes.
And there was the great, I'll call him great, Argentinian, who we remade a 1-pointer when I saw it. But Maureen Orchard had said because he got good sitting balance, even though he was double amputee above the knee, and he lost one arm as well, they wanted to make him a 2 because of his balance. He said, oh, no, but he's got good sit. I said, that's nothing to do with the propulsion of your chair if you've only got one hand, because you can go maybe reasonably quickly in one direction, but you can't switch directions. Well, yeah. And so you've got to have some players in that mix. Players have to come forward and want to become classifiers.
So
Yeah.
our third eye is not about the player. Phil, it's not about the player. It's about the system.
Yeah.
The players just go, they get classified, but we think the system, something is broken in the system with the classification, how they classify the players now. Something's broken.
Well, you actually said in the interview that we streamed that at that moment when you changed to the new system, it was because if you didn't, you was going to be losing players to other sports because the low pointers were just going to miss out. We're at that stage again right now.
Well, that's really a tragedy. But you've got to take that up with IWBF if you can, if they'll listen to you. Now, I don't know with the organisation being called the Delinquents. I don't know if they will, but surely they're open to listen to people. And I know that you can now, John. I'm amazed at some of the letters I've seen from you. You can put your argument very, very well.
I am multi-talented. I am multi-talented, Phil. I won't lie.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point. It's not the players' fault, like I said.
A lot better when you were firing those threes in. You could have had maybe a 60% average, rather than 40.
I was told regarding 3-point shooting, anything over 30% was good to go.
Well, okay, so you stuck at 40, did you?
Yeah. No, I think it did have a 60-point game once.
Okay.
I think it did.
So moving on from that,
yeah, but really, really continue to work very hard on that if things are wrong. That's what we do.
Well, we also heard from one of the writings that someone sent us, Terry Clark.
Yeah.
I can't remember if he said you was the chairman of GBWBA at the time, but there was an AGM at Stoke Mandeville and someone kicked off saying no to able bodies playing our leagues.
Yeah.
And then he wrote back to us and said, I've remembered who it was. It was Vinnie Ross. Vinnie Ross kicked the right storm up saying AB shouldn't be gracing our sport.
Right.
Now, at the moment, we've got this dilemma in, even though I'm banned and Cinny's been attacked by them, the BWB setup right now is allowing able bodies into the Premier League. And the problem we've got with that is, if the able bodies, like Nottingham, who's just won the Premier League, win, they go into the European League next year, but their star player who was able-bodied can't feature because they're in Europe.
Right.
So what's the point of having ABs in the Premier Division?
Well, this is, unfortunately he's passed away now, Tibuto, my best mate from the US, and he was always against it. I was always against it. Vinny, obviously. I've never spoken to Vinny on that particular topic, but obviously he was against it. And but some people were for it, particularly Canadians. Reg McClellan and others thought it was good for the sport. And I'm not sure they were too keen on even having a classification system. That was very Dutch at the time as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Back to maybe 1990, something like that. But it's not right. But they've got to find more players who do warrant to play that aren't able-bodied. But it takes a lot of effort, as you know.
Yeah.
And you're not. And the other danger with having ABs in is that, again, that shunt up the system and out the top end for true ones or twos will be probably accelerated by that process that they're there.
Yeah.
But money's got to be put into finding new players. They've got to be there,
Yeah.
So changing the subject on now, Phil.
Yeah.
You've seen all these great eras of basketball.
Yeah.
What's the greatest era that you think you've seen? Like tournaments or...
Well, I said after the World Cup, the Gold Cup in Japan, in Yamagata in 2002, I said for me that was the greatest set of great matches that I'd seen in men's wheelchair basketball. In women's wheelchair basketball, the greatest team I think I ever saw was the American team in Athens in 2004. They played just perfect for me. Wheelchair basketball, pick and roll. I don't know who they played in the final, but they marmalised them by half time. But it was purely because of their style of play. Now, 2002, I can only really remember in pretty reasonable detail the semi-finals and then the final. But I mean, that match in the semis with you and Australia was just amazing. I mean, I remember that steal by Colin right at the end, which turned it all around, I think. And I don't know how many you scored. I'm looking at you now, lad, but I don't know how many you scored. But and I've forgotten that. But and then the other semi, between Canada and the US.
Yeah, double overtime.
And how Schulte blew Patrick Anderson's mind. He must have done.
Yeah, he did.
For him to turn down that layup to give them a 4-point lead with about 8 seconds to go.
Well, me and Saint have been saying, of all the games that we study and we watch, there's never been another World Championships where one semi-final was won by 2 points and the other one was won in double overtime.
Right, yeah.
It's never been that close.
The final was a great game. I mean, you nearly brought it back, didn't you, with that shooting from outside, from memory?
Yeah, then we went, the last 6 minutes, we never scored a basket, did we? It killed us.
I know that. But that can happen against pretty good teams. I mean, Paul Schulte was in his pomp at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Talk about an athlete.
I think they had 4 teams, Phil, there that were all at their peak of their power. That's why I think it was such a great tournament. You had 4 great teams, and I think that's the first time you'd think that you didn't know who could win the gold medal.
Yeah, that's right. And but maybe from the earlier days, the greatest match I ever saw was the final in Heidelberg in '72 between the US and Israel. So Israel had all its walking players. The US had a few, by the way.
Yeah.
But Ed Owen was playing for the States with Denver Branham. And of course, Israel had Haggai at his peak. Now, how old would he be then? Because he started in '64 when he was probably about 16. So in '72, he'd be 24, he'd be perfect. And so final basket, and I think they won 58-57. Owen gets in the key. Haggai stood up on his foot plate. I'm not kidding. But he still just can't quite foul him or tip the ball away. And Ed Owen puts it in, he was so tall, just put it in, flipped it in, and that was it. So went, done. It'd have been a match where it went, I think Haggai put 10 in on the trot from outside. It was that sort of game. And but still the Americans had the more of the fast break, even though Israel had a great fast break. I don't think he did much more than fast breaking this guy. And it was just an amazing match. And when you think back to those days in '72, a final of 58-57, when you think the final of the stand-up basketball in Munich between the US and Russia or Soviet Union was 51-50. That just shows what level we're talking about.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you, guys. That's the end of part 1. See you on the next show for the Delinquent Show for part 2 of the Phil Craven interview.